The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics. And for the past 7 years, I've been working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. College football regular season is over with that Army-Navy game in the rearview mirror. And that means it's the time of the year where we have NFL 4 days a week. Hello, Saturday football.
Nothing better than Saturday football. NFL should be 7 days a week, 24/7. I wish we could get it all the time. I'm addicted to this thing. Oh gosh, there's nothing better than it. But let's talk about our first segment where we will be grading these scriptwriters on how they did for episode 14 of this NFL season. And let's dive into that crazy Rams versus Ravens game. The Rams had a 70% win probability after that DeMarcus Robinson revenge touchdown as he played for the Ravens last year. And then the Rams took a 5-point lead with 4 minutes remaining, but there would be 2 more scores after that, sending the game to overtime. Ultimately, the Ravens won on a punt return TD and now have that solid hold on the home field advantage for the AFC.
Yeah, our numbers would make Baltimore about a 50% chance to get that number 1 seed now. Obviously, the game, the Sunday night game in Jacksonville is going to be huge for them, but we've got them at about a 50% shot at the 1 seed, and then Miami and Kansas City each have about a 25% chance to round it out there.
Yeah, is this Ravens offense even going to be sustainable without Mark Andrews?
They stepped up last week because Isaiah Likely, I mean, he had a huge game. He had averaged 11.9 yards per target. So he basically played the Mark Andrews role to a T. Now, I don't know that Likely's going to be able to do that this week as the Jags are 5th in success rate allowed to tight ends. But the other person that stepped up for Baltimore's offense is Odell Beckham Jr., who is averaging 1.69 more yards per route run in the 4 games he hasn't been listed on the injury report this season than the games that he was either limited or missing practice. So you could say that, Odell's been dealing with injuries basically since that Super Bowl injury that he had a few years back with the Rams. And when he's healthy, he might still be one of the elite receivers in the league. I mean, he's been above 3 yards per route run in weeks that he's practiced in full. So, I don't know. I mean, if Odell can be a top 15 wide receiver, I'm not really worried about this Ravens offense without Mark Andrews. But if Odell's, top 50-ish wide receiver, like he has been, in recent years, then our Andrews injury is going to hurt, and the Ravens are going to have to hope they can get him back, for the playoffs.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got our free bet of the week, and we sent out a 1-star bet on the Bills -1.5, and you can play it to -2.
Yeah, I expect that Dallas 5-game winning streak comes to an end this week in Buffalo. I mean, it's just what they were doing last week against Philly was not sustainable. Dak threw into a tight window on a season-high 31% of his attempts. 99 of his passing yards came into tight windows. That's completely unsustainable. That's the most tight window yards of any quarterback in a game this season. I expect Prescott to struggle in this matchup on Sunday because the Bills have an 83% zone coverage rate, 6th highest in the NFL, and Prescott's yards per attempt against zone is a league low 73% of his yards per attempt against man coverage.
Yeah, we talked about in the offseason about how he threw so many picks last year, and we kind of thought that luck would change, but I think it might have gone a little too far here. But how are the matchups for Dak's weapons this week?
Well, when you look at the Cowboys passing offense, it's going to start with CeeDee Lamb, 9th in success rate. But, I mean, he's going to be shut down on the inside, and he runs more than half his routes from the slot. And the Bills, after they lost Tre'Davious White, their best remaining cornerback is nickelback Taron Johnson, 4th in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot. So I think that's a good matchup for the Bills. Taron Johnson on CeeDee Lamb on the inside. The other place that Dak's been going to a lot this year is tight end Jake Ferguson, a little bit of a breakout year for him. He's 10th in yards per route run. But the Bills are 6th in EPA per target allowed to tight end. So I think the Bills can stop Ferguson and Lamb, and Dak's going to have to go elsewhere. I also think Dallas right tackle Terrence Steele on an island is going to struggle across from Greg Rousseau, who ranks 15th in pass rushing efficiency.
Yeah, and I saw that you flagged the Bills' offensive scheme for changing a little bit. What's going on there?
So they get Dawson Knox back last week from wrist surgery. And you remember in the offseason, they talked a ton about how they were going to play 2 tight ends. And that's why they spent that first-round draft capital on Dalton Kincaid. Knox is back. They go back to that. So the 31% 12 personnel usage rate was their highest since week 3 when, Knox went out. And that's going to be key this week because the Cowboys defense is allowing 0.14 more EPA per drop back versus 12 personnel than 11 personnel this year. They like to run a lot of dime. And if you're going to run 12 personnel, they can't use those extra safeties on the field. And the Cowboys really aren't good against tight ends. They're 25th in EPA per target allowed to tight ends. And, Dalton Kincaid's had a great year, 5th in success rate. Dawson Knox, we know he's dangerous, particularly in the red zone. So I think the Bills having 2 tight ends on the field this week is going to be very important.
All right, well, I feel like the big question every time someone plays the Cowboys is, will the Bills be able to hold up against that pass rush?
Well, the Dallas pass rush, they get after everybody. But, I think the Bills are better suited than most offenses to hold them off. I mean, you look at it, their offensive line has been one of the most healthy units in the NFL. The starters have gotten 97% of the snaps this year, and because of that, they rank 5th in pass block efficiency, and all 5 starters will be out there this week to limit that Cowboys pass rush. And I also think the pass rush is going to be kept honest by Josh Allen getting out and scrambling. They can't get too far up the field or Josh is just going to take off. So Josh has been an extremely efficient runner throughout his career, 5.6 yards per carry. I think everyone who watches the NFL knows that Josh is dangerous as a runner. But the Bills in the offseason stated they didn't want to run their Pro Bowl quarterback as much. They wanted to keep him healthy. And so they were like, we're going to find offense elsewhere, maybe getting these heavy 12 personnel packages like we talked about earlier. We'll run the ball a little bit better. And Josh only averaged 3.7 carries in the first 6 games this year. So they kept to their word on that. However, the Bills started trailing, started losing. They threw all caution out the window. Allen has averaged 7.1 rushing attempts per game since week 7. And he had a season high 10 runs last week in Kansas City, including that touchdown run. And the other thing is they're designing runs for him now. It's not just scrambles. I mean, Allen has at least 2 designed quarterback runs in every game with new offensive coordinator Joe Brady after only doing so twice in the first 10 weeks this year. So I think Josh, dangerous runner, is going to keep the Cowboys pass rush honest. It's also, they're high man coverage team. So if they turn their backs to Josh, he'll take off there. And we just think the Bills should be a cheap 3 here. So 1.5 is value to us. And I think it's 2 at Circa and market right now. And I would certainly take that as a best bet.
All right. I love it. Always fun to have a bet on one of these huge games, but let's switch it over to our next segment. We've got the injury watch, and it looks like the wheels are falling off in Houston.
Yeah, I think C.J. Stroud is going to miss this game with a concussion. Now, we have seen some quarterbacks clear concussion protocol later in the year. If this was week 2, no one was clearing it, but it's come up to like almost a third of players are clearing concussion protocol after one or without even waiting a week now. So it's just so hard to monitor that. And so we'll have to, we're not going to make any opinion on this game until we know if Stroud is going to play or not. The other thing, though, the problem is that, they already we talked about the Tank Dell injury for them last week, but now Nico Collins is out too. And he's had an incredible year with Stroud and new offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick. Nico Collins is 4th in EPA per target this season. I don't think we ever thought we'd see him on the top 5 leaderboard for the wide receivers. And then on defense, Texans first round pick Will Anderson left last game in the 4th quarter with an ankle injury, and he has 14 quarterback hits this year. That ranks 3rd among all defenders. So I think they're kind of optimistic and can be excited about the return they're getting from that draft pick. But if he misses this game as well, that's a lot of key guys out for the Texans.
All right, well, it looks like the Saints are going to be getting a pair of offensive weapons back. How much is that going to help this week?
Well, they only averaged 4 yards per play last week, and we saw how frustrated everyone was getting with Derek Carr, even though they were winning. They were, they're up a couple scores on the Panthers there, but everyone in New Orleans, from the offensive linemen to the fans to the media, seems to hate Derek Carr, which is bad because they gave him that huge multi-year contract. They do get back, though, this week, and they could improve, and we know winning solves everything in the NFL. They get back. Rashid Shaheed and Taysom Hill are worth 1.2 points, according to our metrics, both those guys combined. And Shaheed, he adds a a crucial presence to this offense that will be particularly helpful this week against the Giants team that blitzes so much. Shaheed can burn. And if he gets matched up one-on-one on the outside when the Giants are sending a 5-man pass rush, maybe against rookie Deontay Banks or something, he will blow by Banks and potentially hit one of those bombs that we've seen him do so many times this year. He has 10 receptions on passes with 20-plus air yards. That's 8th in the NFL despite missing time with the injury.
All right, well, it looks like the 49ers are starting to rack up those injuries on defense. Are you worried about any of these?
Well, we don't know who's going to play for the Niners and who isn't. Now, looking at the practice reports, it looks like the Cardinals could be facing a 49ers defense without 5 starters. So they've already been without all-pro safety Talanoa Hufanga due to that torn ACL, but the secondary takes another hit with that groin injury from Charvarius Ward, and Ward leads the NFL with 20 passes defended. That'd be a big loss for the 49ers. Now, you look at the pass rush. They could be without 2 interior defenders. Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave have combined for 85 pressures this season. So, troubles on the back end, troubles in the pass rush, and at linebacker. Dre Greenlaw has been dealing with hip and ankle injuries. So you look at all of it and you're like, well, maybe not all 5 of those guys missed, but maybe they do, because San Francisco is competing for home field advantage throughout the postseason, and Kyle Shanahan might be, compelled to sit those guys, being a double-digit favorite here in Arizona, and he's got that massive game against the Ravens on deck next week. So if those guys aren't going to be 100% and he wants them to be healthy for next week and a postseason run in general, they might sit those defenders who are all dealing with injuries.
All right. Well, I think that's a great analysis on that game. Let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got stock up, stock down, and whose stock are you buying right now?
I'm going to buy the Vikings quarterback change from Josh Dobbs, who is averaging negative 0.9 EPA per play, to Nick Mullins, who I don't think is just a product of Kyle Shanahan's system. In fact, we've seen Mullins average 0.23 EPA per play in a limited sample since 2021 when he left San Francisco. Now, Mullins might not have starting right tackle Brian O'Neill this week, but Justin Jefferson told reporters that he is going to play Saturday. So you got Jefferson, you've got Jordan Addison for Mullins to throw to, and TJ Hawkinson, 5th in yards per route run among tight ends, will be crucial against a Bengals defense, 31st in success rate allowed to tight ends. You look at the Bengals up front, their big strength, Trey Hendrickson, edge rusher. He has at least 7 pressures in consecutive games. He's dominating per usual, but he will be shut down on Saturday by Vikings left tackle Christian Darrisaw, who ranks 9th in pass blocking efficiency. So I kind of like some of these matchups for Nick Mullins. And I think Mullins is probably better than Dobbs for Kevin O'Connell's system. So I think the Vikings are making the right move after almost getting shut out by the Raiders last week.
Yeah, I feel like if he can just be competent, I mean, the weapons, we talked about it last week, the weapons on this team are insane. But let's shift it over. Whose stock are you selling this week?
I'm going to sell high on Atlanta's passing game. So Desmond Ridder had a season high 347 passing yards last weekend. 50% of them were to Drake London, who's an absolute baller. In any other offense, I feel like Drake London would be considered as one of the best receivers in the NFL, but he just gets stifled by this Arthur Smith ground game week after week. But he showed what he can do last week. Now, the reason I don't think they're going to be able to continue that is because Carolina's pass defense is sneaky good now with J.C. Horn back on the field. The starting cornerback missed 10 games this season after he underwent surgery for that hamstring injury, but Horn is conceding 2.2 yards per target fewer than backup cornerback C.J. Henderson, and Carolina's defense is 6th in EPA per dropback allowed in these last 2 games with Horn. Carolina's defense all season has been incredible against passes to running backs. They're 2nd in EPA per target allowed to running backs, and that's what the Falcons like to do. They like to throw those screens to Bijan Robinson. So I think they can limit that. They're already good at that. The secondary is getting better with Horn, and then Atlanta's offensive line is going to be struggling without potentially both starting tackles. So I just don't know that Arthur Smith is going to trust his backup tackles or a turnover prone Desmond Ridder in wet conditions in Carolina on Sunday. I think this Atlanta passing attack is going downhill.
All right. Well, we've got our DraftKings player of the slate next. Who do you got lined up for us?
I've got Ezekiel Elliott at
Zeke?
$5,800.
Let
And
that man
I
eat.
don't think either of us expected Zeke to be in this DraftKings player of the slate slot at any point this season. But you look at it, I mean, his role is insane without Ramondre Stevenson on the field. He had 22 carries and 8 targets last week. And I think it could at least as many opportunities on Sunday because we know that Kansas City's defense funnels opposing offenses to running backs by design. For years, Steve Spagnuolo has made it a priority to lock up opposing wide receivers and tight ends, and they want to play light boxes and aren't focused on shutting down those dump offs and checkdowns. And so you look at it, the Chiefs are 31st in EPA per rush allowed, and James Cook had 83 receiving yards against the Chiefs last week. So I think the Patriots game plan is going to be entirely focused around Ezekiel Elliott. He may get more than 30 opportunities on Sunday, and at 5,800, I mean, you just have to take that role and put it in your lineup.
Yeah, I saw his prop for receiving last week was at like 2.5 or 3.5, and a bunch of people were screaming to hit that. So I think he cleared that.
It'll be interesting to see what they open it at this week. I mean, I think it probably should open in the 6 range, maybe even higher.
Yeah.
He's going to get a ton of passes.
5.5.
Yeah,
I was thinking 5.5 there. I think that would be a good line. But let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the weather of the week. What are you seeing out there?
There's potential for rain in 8 stadiums this week, so you might want to look at dome games as safe havens for your DFS stacks unless everything clears up by the weekend. And when we look, across the NFL, the Washington LA game certainly looks like it will be the best scoring conditions this week inside SoFi Stadium. That game has a rare total above 50 points. Feels like we hardly see that anymore after about a third of the games were lined in the 50s during that 2020 COVID season. We've come so far back down in the scoring environment. So when you can get a total in the 50s, it makes sense to stack in that game. And it's going to come down to if the Rams right tackle Rob Havenstein can go. Havenstein ranks 13th in pass blocking efficiency, and he's worth 0.8 points to the Los Angeles offense, according to our numbers. So if Havenstein is in, I mean, I think Ram stacks are a slam dunk in DFS tournaments on Sunday.
I like it. Well, let's shift it over to our primetime preview where we have another free bet, and we sent out a 2-star bet on Detroit -4 to -4.5.
Yeah, and this is just a circumstance of, I think this is a great bounce back spot for the Lions. They surrendered 5 sacks last week against the Bears, but I expect the protection to be sorted out much better this week, getting back starting center Frank Ragnow, who ranks 4th in pass blocking efficiency, and not to mention that the Broncos edge rusher Nick Bonito, who leads the team in sacks, is likely out for this game. So I just don't think that it's going to be as troublesome to protect up front for the Lions.
Yeah, and we also know that Jared Goff with the clean pocket, that's a smash play.
Right. In this matchup particularly, it feels like he's going to have a lot of places to go with the ball. So the Broncos are surrendering a 61% success rate to tight ends. That's 29th in the league. We know Sam Laporta has had a great rookie season. And the Broncos, the strength of that defense is those 2 outside cornerbacks, Pat Surtain and Fabian Moreau. But because of that, teams always are throwing at nickelback Jaquan McMillan. He's being targeted every 5.6 cover snaps in the slot. That's 7th most in the league. And the Lions want to throw in the slot anyways to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I think, Goff, when he's not throwing to Laporta, will be throwing to Amon-Ra lined up on the inside. The other thing, the Broncos struggle at defending screens and just passes to the running backs in general. 25th in pass success rate allowed to running backs. We know that Jahmyr Gibbs has been involved more in the screen game recently. He's a 44% receiving success rate. That's 3rd among running backs. So I think Goff's got a ton of places to go with the ball this week. And he'll have his play action game set up as well because Detroit's offense ranks 5th in EPA per rush, and they're absolutely going to gash Denver's defense, 27th in rush success rate allowed.
Yeah, what about on the other side of the ball? How does Denver match up with Detroit's defense?
Well, we know that Sean Payton has been trying to protect Russell Wilson. I don't think Sean Payton likes Russell Wilson, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the offseason there because he's basically just decided that Russell Wilson is the 25th best quarterback in the league, and he's just trying to cater an offense around that. He's doing a good job. I mean, Sean Payton, one of the best offensive minds in the league, but he wants to run the ball. The Broncos are 10th in rush success rate this year, but they're not going to be able to run the ball against the Lions, who are 5th in EPA per rush allowed. The other thing is that the Broncos want to do is throw those, quick passes to Jerry Jeudy in the slot, but he'll be contained on the inside because the Lions have a great nickelback, rookie Brian Branch, who's 7th in yards per cover snap allowed in the slot. So you'd think, okay, well, they're not going to be able to run the ball. They're not going to be able to throw those quick slants to Jerry Jeudy. Is it just going to be, those deep bombs to Cortland Sutton? I mean, I think that's what they're going to try and set up, but I don't know that Wilson is going to have time to look downfield because right tackle Mike McGlinchey ranks 53rd in pass blocking efficiency out of just 57 qualifying tackles. And he will line up across from Detroit's best player on defense, edge defender Aiden Hutchinson, who has 76 pressures. That's 3rd in the NFL. He's certainly been a hit for them in that first-round pick that they took last year. So our model thinks this should be more like Lions -5.5, and that's before we layer on the big matchup advantage. So, I mean, the Detroit side is showing a lot of value for us here on Saturday night.
I love that play, but we've got one more thing, and that is our primetime prop. What do you have for us?
So in that game, Saturday night, primetime prop, I'm going to go with Jared Goff over 251.5 passing yards. So he's 9-6 over this price at home with Ben Johnson as his offensive coordinator. We know Goff can struggle, on grass in weather, wind, cold, but at home, he's been really good against this number. And Johnson will want to get Goff's confidence back after he threw for a season low 161 yards last week in Chicago. And the Broncos are pretty much weak everywhere Goff likes to pass, as I laid out earlier. 29th versus tight ends, 25th versus running backs receiving out of the backfield. Their worst cornerback is a nickel, and Amon-Ra's in the slot. So I just think that Goff is going to be it's going to have one of those 300-yard passing games that we see him have so often at home. And that if you think that, then the over 251.5 is a slam dunk price here.
All right. Well, I think that will do it for our Week 15 podcast. If you're looking for more content, head over to drbobsports.com, where you will find all of Bob's college football write-ups for the bowl season.
Yeah, and Bob's historically done pretty well valuing all of those opt-outs better than the market. It's a ton to keep track of, but when you can do handicapping on a player-by-player basis, as Bob does, you can get a pretty sizable edge in the bull market. So you could certainly monitor the website for all of Bob's analysis during bowl season.
All right. Well, please go ahead, leave us a thumbs up. You're enjoying the content, and we will be back next Friday for our NFL preview.